All right, number 552 after the lesson. I didn't. $552 after the lesson. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Let me turn this camera here so you can see me. Good morning, everyone. What's that? Oh, this right here, I think, or the door. All right. Oh, yeah. All right, let's start over. Good morning, everyone. This morning we are going to look at Revelation chapter 14. This morning we're looking at Revelation chapter 14 mostly. I know that we were thinking about doing 14 and 15, but 15 kind of goes a little bit better with the next chapter. And so next week we'll do 15 and 16. So let's get back to thinking about chapter 13 now to see where we're going so that we can get to chapter 14. Chapter 13, in chapter 13, we learned that Satan uses certain methods to destroy the church, or trying to destroy the church, but after he fails in those things, he uses other methods. And so, by using political power and religious power of the Roman Empire, by using national power and local power or economic power, he influences the people there. And so the Roman Empire is trying to enforce this emperor worship, not just for the emperor, but for the entire system of what's going on there. And they're going to openly kill those who would not worship the emperor. Most famously, this was in the Colosseum. They would do this with wild animals. But Satan's power to deceive and allow these things to happen would not last for long. In chapter 13, in verse 5 and verse 9, he says it's going to last for 42 months. That's the 3.5 years, the half of 7. It's only for a time, whatever that time is. So, the question then is, who's not going to succumb to Satan's deceptions? What group of people will not worship the beast? And it turns out that it's going to be those people who had their name written in the Lamb's Book of Life. The people who had the seal on them. Those who have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb through their obedience to the gospel is when that redemption happens. That's the happy part. The sad part is, for us who cling onto life as human beings, is that this picture is given in chapter 13 in verse 7, is given through the picture of martyrdom. And so in verse 7 of chapter 13, it says, "And it was given to him to make war." This is the beast now. "It was given to him to make war on the saints and to overcome them. And authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation were given to him." These wonderful blessings are going to come through a difficult life here on earth. That's what we're promised. We're not promised physical blessings necessarily. So now in chapter 14, we notice new visions and new proclamations made by God that would encourage these saints here in Asia Minor, in these 7 churches, to remain faithful even to the point of death, like it says in chapter 2, verse 10. And beginning with there's a vision of 144,000, the same 144,000 we saw before. But this time they're on mountain, so is the mountain in front of the throne? How does that work? Well, the answer is this is symbolic language. We're not supposed to be looking for physical representations in these things. These are metaphorical things. Then we're going to see three angels, and they have a message, the first half of the chapter, first third of the chapter, and then the second half of the chapter, we get the actual harvest of what I would contend are four more angels, although one of them looks kind of like Jesus. So there's a debate out there as to whether this person is Jesus or whether it's another angel. If you don't count him as an angel, my argument is there's only 6 angels in chapter 14, and that just doesn't sound like John. This doesn't sound like John to do 6. He likes 7. 7 bowls, 7 trumpets, 7 everything. So I would say it's an angel, not just because of that, but because of some other things. But we'll get there. So let's first look, though, at the 144,000 that are on Mount Zion here. These I would call the Lamb's elite warriors, or the Lamb's warriors, because they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. In verse 4, it says, they are the ones who have not been defiled. They have kept themselves chaste. They are ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased. Other versions say redeemed. It's the same word. From among men as the first fruits to God and to the Lamb. Couple issues there. Who did the sacrifice go to? Always, always, always. God, Yahweh, the God of our fathers, God of Israel, never went to a lamb. This time it says they're given to the Lamb. This is equating the Lamb with God, is what's going on here. These ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, they have been purchased with the blood of Christ, has paid the price there. Now if we, I won't go down that rabbit trail. No rabbit trails, sorry. No more rabbit trails about redemption. And so there's a sense here, they follow the Lamb wherever he goes, these warriors. And so there's a sense that nothing really needs to be said. Nothing more needs to be said. That the Lamb has won the victory over the dragon and the dragon's sidekicks through his own sacrificial death. And now he calls his people, the Lamb calls his people, to put that victory into practice by following him down the same path or up the same path to the mountain, that Mount Zion picture. And Jesus said the same thing during his public ministry, right? That if anyone wanted to come after him, that they had to take up their cross, they should deny themselves. That was in my thing already this morning, Verna. That's not just picking up on what you were telling me earlier. That they have to deny themselves. This is not self-denial. That's like saying no to the donut. This is denying self, taking up their cross and following him. That somehow the way to victory is not at the end of a sword, but is through the way of the cross. It was difficult, it was strange, and it was challenging in that day. And it's difficult, and it's strange, and it's challenging in our own day today. John here, let's turn over to Psalm 2. John is coming right out of Psalm, the second Psalm here. One of my favorite ones. The nations rage here in Psalm 2, verse 1. Why are the nations in an uproar? And the peoples devising this vain thing. The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers counsel together against Yahweh and his anointed. Let us tear their fetters apart, their restraints, and cast away their cords from us. So the kings of this earth have tied us, is the picture. They have bound us in fetters, in chains, or rope. by their empire structures, through the power structures. And the author of the psalm here says, throw those things away, because the reign of the king that God is going to set, his own son, it says later, today I have begotten thee. Later, that's this psalm. The John is working here with Psalm 2 in Revelation 14. The nations rage. They imagine these foolish things that they're going to go up against God. But God's answer is to set his king, his son, upon his holy hill of Zion. But as for me, I have installed my king, verse 6, upon Zion, my holy mountain. Psalm 2, verse 6. And now we get the mention of the Lamb standing on the mountain in verse 1. Elizabeth, look at me. Look at me. You need to be a little bit quieter. All right, back to where we were. So we've seen this dragon in the last chapter, chapter 13. We saw the dragon becoming furious with this woman and her offspring. And so we've seen the two monsters that the dragon gives his power to, the great imperial monster who comes from the sea, the chaos monster, and the local, more secondary monster who emerges from the land, from the immediate community, which is a representation of Rome. We have this great empire who then is only empowered because of the loyalty of the local structures and governors. And so they are the ones here that are reflected in Psalm 2, that are these nations that are raging and fuming and threatening and blaspheming. But now God is revealing his chosen king. His chosen king is not alone, though. He's surrounded by the elite warriors. And there is no doubt of his victory, even though it will come at the end of a sword. So then we see the first of 7 angels, and we're presented with 3 angels in sort of quick succession here in Revelation 14, and we see that they have 3 different announcements to make. They're carrying these important declarations from God, starting in verse 6. And the first angel is proclaiming the eternal gospel, it says, to the whole of the earth, that everyone has been given an opportunity to hear the gospel and respond to its message. And when he starts proclaiming this gospel, this angel says with a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of judgment has come." And this is somehow good news, that the judge and the judgment has come. This gospel is good news to those who hear it and receive it and obey it. But this gospel is also bad news to those people who reject it. Those people who fear God because God is ready to judge. We need to worship God and not worship the beast, is what this first angel is saying. That's what this gospel that he's bringing is saying. The second angel now says, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, in verse 8 now. He says, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. And as we looked at in chapter 13, Babylon is the first of these 4 great beasts that are predicted in Daniel chapter 7. During the days of Daniel, Babylon was the world power that he was prophesying about. And so the idea, the caricature of Babylon came to represent this wicked world power of the day. And that Peter used, trying to bring up the paper from our class this morning, when it says that Babylon came to represent this one: idolatry and immorality and wickedness and just sheer cruelty. And this angel is giving an entirely different message than what everybody would have seen during Daniel's day. That Babylon, fallen is Babylon the Great. The name Babylon, though, you see how that message is opposite of what they were actually seeing in the world. And Peter uses this the same way when he writes his own letter. He uses the name Babylon in 1 Peter the same way. 1 Peter chapter 5 in verse 13 says that she who is at Babylon sends you greetings, and so does Mark, my son. He expected all of his readers to know what Babylon was. This is like the end of the letter. He's signing off. Everybody knows that Peter is calling out Rome as being this Babylon character. And so Peter is giving his greetings from Rome, since there was not a literal Babylon during this time period for Christians to live in. The city had been lost for several hundred years up to this point. It was destroyed and never seen again. Like nobody lived in it after it was destroyed. It's really weird. We didn't even know where Babylon the city was until 100 years ago. It was lost for almost 2,000 years, never to be seen. And so Peter is giving his greetings from Babylon. And so that sort of the idea that Babylon is Rome fits the context here in Revelation is what I'm trying to say. Let me keep going. So chapter 13 has been all about this terrifying beast that is persecuting God's people. And this is the Roman Empire's persecution on the Christians. And chapter 14 is not then describing some fall of some other nation. These images are connected here. And this is the problem when you try and use Revelation like a timeline. You have to break images up into vastly different contexts and meanings that just don't make sense. Babylon is Rome, and the Roman Empire is declared to be fallen. The problem is, just like in Daniel's day when he looks out, Babylon's still here. When John looks out, Rome is still here. But he says Babylon is fallen. What does this mean? Well, John is using something that's called prophetic certainty. Daniel does this. Isaiah does this many, many times. He prophesies an event like it's already happened, even though it's not happened. But he prophesies it like it has happened because God has declared it, and so it's final. He just expects that it's going to happen. He doesn't know how it's going to happen. But he sees the expectation of it. And so therefore the event must happen. Isaiah does the same thing in his own prophecy. In fact, the words fallen Babylon come from Isaiah chapter 21 and verse 9, when he says, fallen is Babylon, and all the carved images of her gods are shattered on the ground. Now, what does John say? Fallen is Babylon, who has made all the nations to drink the wine of the passion of her immorality. This is a critical linkage. In Hebrew thought, idolatry and immorality were linked. They were together. And so if somebody says something is idolatrous, many times they mean there was some sort of physical, sexual behavior going on that should not have happened. And so, but Babylon hadn't fallen yet when Isaiah said these things, right? But God had already decreed that those sorts of things would happen. So the second angel here is doing the same thing through John in his writing. That the fall of the Roman Empire is pictured as something that is certain or is a certainty, even though it hasn't occurred yet. So let's look at the third angel now, starting in verse 9 through verse 11 or 12. And so the point here is that judgment is certain. The followers of the Lamb are then forced to realize by these visions here in verse 14, or chapter 14, that not only will they ultimately enjoy the immediate presence of God and the Lamb, but that their faith will be vindicated by the judgment that is brought on their oppressors. And it's not to say that we need to be happy when we see other people suffer, right? That's not what we're talking about. But what we're talking about is that feeling of relief when we go to the judge and we finally get a judgment because somebody stole my car and now they're going to be paying me back. It's a big relief. I spent a lot of money and my time and effort into putting into the car, and now it's gone. But now I have hope that it's going to be repaid back to me. And so these beasts from chapter 13, they're going to use every method at their disposal at their disposal to try and gain the allegiance of the world, to gain the loyalty of the world, whether by hook or crook, as the saying goes, by force or by bribery. They're going to use these methods. But those who do not belong to this world, those who belong to the heavenly realm that's yet fully to be seen around us, and those who resist these deceptive programs and ploys of these beasts, these are the people who have the hope of that gospel, the hope of receiving a fair judgment. Now, the harvest, verse 14 through the end of this chapter, is a little bit more difficult. It's often more commented on because everybody thinks that this is some other nation or some nation around them, and that's not the point of what's going on here. The point of what's going on here is we need to look back in John's own writings and try and connect these images is what we need to do. So we have Christ, or possibly his angels, depending on who the one like the Son of Man is, right? He is coming to harvest the earth, reaping what has been sown. Who does the sowing? We help with the sowing. The seed is his. And we do the watering. Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the increase. So that's something that we helped with. This is people he's talking about here. So this angel swings his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped. That means it was gathered, it was harvested. And I believe that this is picturing a righteous people being gathered to the Lord. And if we go back in chapter 14, we can see at the end of verse 4, it says, these have been purchased from among men, the first fruits to God and to the Lamb. The first fruits were a partial harvest. And so I think that's what's going on here at the beginning of verse 14. It's the harvest of the righteous, as opposed to the harvest of the wicked later on in the chapter. And so the wheat are reaped, just like in the story from Matthew, when they are reaped and put in the barn, and then the rest of the tares are cut down and burnt in the fire. And so once the redeemed are reaped, then another angel comes with a sharp sickle, and he again gathers the grapes and throws them into the winepress of God's wrath. And that's a picture of devastating judgment. And this is a picture that comes straight out of Isaiah again. Isaiah 63, verses 1 through 6. Don't have time to get through it today, but Isaiah uses that same exact language. And so the enemies are trampled and their blood is poured out for their rebellion. And we notice that this imagery has something special about it. Let's read verse 20. And the winepress was trodden outside the city. So there's a city involved. And there's blood. And the blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles. That's like chest high on a human at least. For a distance of, depends on what version you have, 184 miles, 200 miles, 1,600 stadia, about the length of the land of Palestine, about the nation of Israel. It's this, for the full length of all the land. There's this blood. The problem is, there's a special symbol here. And this is a very graphic symbol. It's a graphic symbol to stop worshiping the beast. Who died outside the city? Jesus. Whose blood was spilled outside the city? Jesus. God says that these people are destroyed, but they don't have to be, because one was already destroyed. Punishment. It says the smoke goes up forever. So the emperors and the empire that these people are worshiping are going to fall. And the fall will be so great that the blood is going to flow for miles. And this is not a literal image here. This imagery makes a powerful point, though, for us, that doom is coming, and it's not going to be pretty. The prophecy has been made, the die has been cast, the stage is set. If we're going to use all these metaphors, things are ready to go. And the people of God will be gathered, and those that worship the beast will be punished. And so the message for us is to repent before it's too late, because this doom is a certainty. It is going to come. And chapters 15 through 19 are going to reveal the fulfillment of those declarations now, these proclamations that these angels have made. And so we have a choice. The lesson for us then is before us, as the saying goes. The lesson is before us. That these two harvests, they might be different ways of describing the same judgment, but the point is that human empire and the persecution of the human empire will eventually stop, because God is going to put an end to it. Because we do serve a good God who does not tolerate evil. And so we need to be the 144,000. We need to be true people of God. We need to be in true allegiance to Him, to give Him our loyalty. And we do that by remaining pure. We need to follow the Lamb wherever He goes, and do not give in to the defilement of the world. We need to be holy through His blood so that we can be joined to God. And I would say point number 2, and the final point here, is that if you worship the beast instead of God, it's going to lead to eternal punishment. Do not let the things of this world be what you worship. Do not let politics be what you worship. Do not let your lifestyle be what you worship. The smoke of the torment of those people who do not worship God goes up forever and ever. And this is not a rest. There is no rest for them day or night. This is just amazingly impactful imagery describing this horror and suffering of worshiping anything other than the one true God. That's the lesson for us this morning. We need to stay away from false worship. Make sure that we only worship God and not our stomachs, not our politics, not anything else that is around us. We need to be the 144,000, to be people, to be true people of God by remaining pure to Him and joining ourselves to Him through the blood of the Lamb. That's the lesson for this morning. Next week, we'll look at 15 and 16 and the bowls, judgments. In the big picture of things, though, remember these bowls come right out of the previous section. It is not a further time period in time, like Revelation is some sort of timeline that we need to, this is the next one, this is the next empire. No. What's going on here is a repetition of what has just happened in chapter 14. The bowls explain the judgments that we just saw. This is not further timeline. This is a recycling of the events. That's the lesson for this morning. Have a good day, everyone.